All right, we are recording. So, hello, I'm Nick. I'm the facilitator this week. If you guys haven't figured that out. All right, so this week's video's looking at the different AAC devices. Um, the first question was talking about being an advocate. Applying them to um, Vanessa and the other kids involved. What do you guys would say would be the benefits of using this or being an advocate of high tech versus low tech AAC devices?
Well, I think one positive is that they communicate. They're able to, it's able to speak for them so they can do other things besides just point. They can actually get involved in conversations and answer questions. Like Vanessa was starting to say like little words, as she was using her device. So that helped her, acquire like spoken language.
That's true. And the one thing I really did like is how she's not just completely using her device. Like she's able to communicate, attempt to speak, and she's also able to jump in and out. So I thought that was really interesting.
So my background is in speech therapy. So something that I learned all through undergrad was that like devices are super important because they help the kids or the adults, whoever's using them, communicate things that they can't communicate verbally on their own, but that they also can teach them. Like the more they hear the sounds, the more that they'll be able to verbalize them and be able to associate them with things. So I think that just allowing them to display their intelligence and then also to build upon their intelligence and helping them like learn how to communicate in other ways than just using their devices. So I think that not only do they help them communicate, they also help them learn more communication skills.
I agree with that. I liked how the dad said before she used the device in Vanessa's videos, she wasn't trying to babble or even make any kind of language. And then after using it for, like in the second video, after using it for that like 7 months, that amount of time, she was starting to mimic it and make more babbling sounds and try to use her own voice to communicate as well as the device.
Yeah, that's true. I thought that was a big step too. Like the dad was even saying in the very beginning when they were interviewing, like he could tell, watching her develop, that something needed to be done, something needed to be changed, and you could see her when she was even being asked simple things like, "What is your favorite animal?" How she was able to scan through, click horse, and try to sound it out. Like I was saying earlier, that way it's not just solid use of the device, but she's also learning how to say it. So definitely. And as far as, I kind of like this question, an advocate of high and low tech AAC devices. One of the things I do like, and I've kind of seen more and more over the length of this course, is both of them work. Yes, obviously there are their strengths and weaknesses of using a high tech versus a low tech, but using what you have around you and using what resources, you can build a low tech device and still able to communicate very well. High tech, obviously, it's going to help you out a little bit more, but sometimes it's really just per the student. Definitely.
I think even just using a low tech for nonverbal kids, that may get their vocabulary started, so then they don't need to go on to that high tech. So the low, they may need just that initial help, where the low tech will help them do that. Where as they grow, they may develop that language that they needed.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think starting with low tech devices is like, I think some people don't or can't graduate to high tech devices, but I think some students don't need the full high tech device. They don't need it to say every every sentence. Sometimes they need a low-tech device that kind of helps them generate their full sentence or their full thought. And then they can, with the use of the low-tech device, whether it's pictures or words, they can verbalize and use that to get their point across. So I think that, like you said, Nick, it kind of depends on the student, what their needs are, and also maybe how old they are, how good their like motor skills are, and that type of thing.
That's actually a really good point. You made me think of something else. Using low tech is kind of like a stepping stool to move into a high tech, especially because like thinking to the book we read, Out of My Mind. If they just introduced her to a high tech device right off the bat, I do feel like certain kids, her included, might be a little bit intimidated or not know the device to its fullest extent. So by using a low-tech device and then slowly, gradually going up, you're building upon. So I definitely think that also helps.
There's a life skills room in the school where I work right now, and I work with those kids sometimes. And 3 of them got devices this year, like AAC devices. And the speech therapist that was working with them started all of them on like a board just to see, because one of the children needed like the high contrast board, like it has a black background with like neon letters and pictures. And they need, like you were saying, they needed to see if they had the motor skills to like pick out the words and could make the connection, like to say, I want this. And now 2 of the kids are using Proloquo to go. And the one student, they're still working with him to master the low-tech device. So it was really interesting to see like the speech therapist's thought process and like how she wanted to go about getting them to the device that would work for them.
Yeah, that's true. So next question, out of everything we've picked up from this course, this is the one part that really stuck out to me, especially when Dr. Hicks was talking about it. And it's, how would you approach school principals, parents, superintendents, insurance companies, and other professionals who are strongly against the use of AAC devices? I mean, that's huge. Like, how do you go up to your principal and say, hey, look, my student needs this device, this specialized computer, and then we need to add in a switch, and we need to add in all these other components, and it's going to be a couple grand. Like, how do you do that without getting the blank look like that? The one thing I do remember what Dr. Hicks was saying was, bring it up that, it's in the IEP. It says that he needs a specified device because now it's a legal document. And I'm like, that's a real interesting way to put it. But talking to anybody high up about money, especially when they're particularly against AAC devices, that has to be tough. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I think trying to change someone's mind, like a principal, if they don't, agree with them that they don't work, it's hard. Even though you can, say as many positive things as you can, like it's going to benefit the student, it's going to help them communicate, they'll be happier in school. It's hard if they're already set, like, these don't work, I don't like them, I don't want them in my school. So that would be that would be hard to talk them into changing their mind, even though as a teacher, we know that's going to be beneficial for them.
I think you almost have to go with some data that, like, you have the IEP, but maybe have some, data that you've taken, and some things that you've tried to present and say, like, these things we've tried, they're not working. We need something that they can scan or use a head switch or something that'll make more of the curriculum accessible to them.
That's what I was going to say. I think the best way to go about it is to have some data, whether it's helping a kid like setting up a low-tech device for your student to use, and then maybe depending on their diagnosis and their abilities, maybe using like an iPad with a free app and being like, look at how much more engaged the student can be when we give them this. And imagine how much better it would be if they had a device that they could take home with them and that they could use at recess or during lunchtime so that they can interact with their peers. Because I think a lot of times, obviously, school is about school. They need to learn and they need to meet like the criteria of each grade. But I think that sometimes like insurance companies and principals can get caught up in just the school aspect of school, like the academics. But if a kid doesn't have like a social circle, they're not going to enjoy school. So they're not going to want to be at school. So they're not going to want to learn. So I think if you have data for in the classroom and then also just like observation data of how the kid can interact better with their peers and how they can make friends and like gain relationships through the device, I think that one could probably pull at the parents' heartstrings a little bit, and two could prove that not only are you going to be helping improve like the academics for that kid, but maybe also like their whole like social sphere as well,
and make them happier at school.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, no, it definitely goes a lot more than just academics. And if you really bring that into the picture, you could change a lot of minds. And it also it also goes back to what Dr. Hicks was saying about a school district who says, okay, we'll give you this device, but guess what? You're not allowed to bring it home. You have to leave it here. It's that same sort of deal. Mm-hmm. But if you can have the student work with it, master it, it works well. Going into the third part was talking about own experiences. It kind of combines the second part. I remember being at a school 4 years ago where they were trying to get the student a specific communication device. It was supposed to be, what was it? It was supposed to be one of the smart computer devices, touchscreen, where he could scan through. It's kind of like a super iPad. But the school turned around and said, well, maybe not that, but what if we went something like an iPod Touch? Like it was. They were trying to lowball it to get, yeah, we'll fulfill it, but let's go a really cheaper route. And eventually the student won out, bringing up how much benefit it would be, bringing up how an iPod Touch is not going to be practical, even with an app on it. Like they wanted to hook it up to a speaker, and it wasn't going to be practical. Mm-hmm. And that's just from own experience. So it does work. It was a lot of meetings, a lot of budgeting, a lot of talking, but yeah, eventually it does come through. Anybody else have experience that they've known or heard of?
I've just heard the life skills teacher talking about the process to kind of convince the parents that this would be really beneficial. Because for two of the students, the parents were really like, no, they've made strides in their speech therapy. Like they say more words this year than they did last year. So it was hard for the teacher to convince the parents this isn't gonna like hinder their speech. It's an aid to their speech. And, you know, like they'll start saying they hear the words more often. They're able to communicate more. So they'll be trying more with their verbal speech. I just remember hearing about that process. And then on the school side, it seemed like it always came down to money. Like they wanted to try the free apps. They wanted like the parents to provide the iPad. So then like the teacher and the speech therapist are scrambling to find an extra iPad that they could like give the child to try out the apps and things. I remember feeling frustrated, like from a lot of points, but mainly that it came down to money. I know money's a big thing, but if the child's going to benefit for it, like for their lifetime, I don't see why it's not that's not the important thing.
So this isn't like, I don't know, it's not like an experience that I saw working at a school. But one of my little cousins, like not first cousins, but removed cousins, she started developing speech and then stopped talking, like didn't talk to her parents, didn't do anything. Eventually she was diagnosed with autism, and she spent like the maximum time in preschool, if that makes sense. Like she didn't go to first grade or kindergarten until she was 8 years old, something like that. But anyway, she spent it at the ARC of Chester County. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like early intervention. And they used a mix of like low-tech AAC devices, and then also like, I think they're considered high-tech because they had like output voices, but if they weren't like, it was like a Big Mac button, like I want this, that type of thing. But in her first year there, she developed like crazy amounts of speech because she was able to like the words that she knew how to talk, like how to speak, she would say, and then she would use like a postcard exchange, or she would use a Big Mac switch. And now like when I see her, she speaks in full sentences and she sings, and that was just all like within 2 years. And she doesn't need a high-tech device now. Like she doesn't need those devices, but those devices helped her learn speech. So I think like that's something to keep in mind, that when you're like taking it to the school or to parents, like it might not be a long-term thing. It might just be to help them get their speech started and get the foundation that they need, so that way it just like gives them an extra boost where they need it. But that's my experience.
Yeah, I have a little boy in my classroom who's autistic, and he's verbal, he talks, but his ABA uses like feelings bracelets. So like if he's upset or if he's like, you know, angry, he'll choose his the bracelet he wants to wear, and he wears it, you know, and it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But that's, I mean, he's verbal, so he can tell us, like he doesn't need a high tech. So low tech, you know, worked for him, and he doesn't even really need it all the time now, because now he can like, okay, well, why are you upset? And he can tell us like, well, I'm upset because of this. So he doesn't really need to always go to the chart or get the bracelet to, you know, to tell us like what he's feeling.
Well, there you go. That definitely is true. So, alrighty. Anything else you guys wanted to add, or is that pretty much that?
And that's it.
That's it.
All right,
How are we on time? I think we're pretty good.
stop